Welcome to Forestry Now, where we explore the forces impacting profitable and sustainable management of commercial forests and natural woodlands. I'm Dermot McNally. Today I spoke with Paul Lafferty. Paul qualified as a forester in 1989, but now runs his own auctioneering firm. He sells residential and commercial property and also runs forsales.ie, which specialises in the sale of forests, refor land and standing timber. In this interview, we speak about his 11 years with Greenbelt, when afforestation rules were very different. We discussed how he manages his own forests, and then Paul gave me a feel for the typical prices that are being paid for forests in Ireland right now, and how an existing owner might prepare their forest for sale. Finally, Paul also set a very high bar for future guests by offering to be one of the sponsors for this podcast, which I'm delighted with. So thanks to Paul for that. You'll find relevant links and contact details below in the show notes, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. So Paul, would you say that the forestry degree from UCD was good preparation for work with Greenbelt in 1989?
Yes, yeah. Well, it was standard forestry degree, which you needed to get a job. But I suppose, like all degrees, the practical side kicks in. But yes, certainly I knew a Sitka spruce, I suppose, from an Irish spruce or a pine, which all you needed to know in 1989. So, we were lucky. There was quite a big class that time, and we had jobs before we actually qualified.
Was there any element of work placement in the degree, Paul, or was it just summer jobs?
Actually, it was you had 2 years first, and then you had a full year, practical year. You got a job with Coillte, and we're all over the country from Donegal to Waterford to Macroom, Laois, and all over there. So we had a full year, and you were fully paid as a forest worker, which was great when you were a student.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I don't think they do that now, Paul. I wouldn't.
No, it's much shorter. They do practical summers, I think, and I think now. That was the way it was in my time, as they say.
Okay, and Paul, would you describe what your role was with Greenbelt then from 89 to 2000?
From 89, yeah. Well, I was basically a forest area manager, I suppose. I started off with working under the wing of a few of the other foresters, more senior foresters in Greenbelt at the time. I think there was 2 or 3 ahead of that. And as your main job was afforestation, so procuring land, basically, if land came up for sale and it was suitable for forestry, one of your jobs was to buy that. And then if farmers, owners came to you to plant, and you organised the planting, got the approval, which was very simple at the time, and applied for the grant, did up a species map and sent it off to Gavin, and they submitted the application, and met the inspectors on the ground then, and they had a few maybe corrections and things like that for you to do. But the main job was definitely afforestation and contract with the contractors. Then you had some main subcontractors and dealing with them and haggling over prices. And all that, and making sure tried to get everything through the second phase of the grant after 4 years. Big problem we had in this part of the country was trespass, of course, with animals trespassing and all that, and then of course frost damage in the 90s. You had a lot of frost damage. Like we were just planting the species decision, I suppose, in the early days. Well, first of all, every bit of land would be planted. There was no question, that mightn't get approval. Everything was approved from. And you planted 100% of the ground. You had to, you literally had to put the plough into the river and plough out from it. We were doing some single moorboard ploughing those times. And if you hadn't planted up to the river, the inspector would be inclined to dock you area, and under hedgerows, or if you left anything out that wasn't planted. So as I say now, when I come there, they're kind of 110% planted, And the species choice was either Sitka spruce pure, Sitka spruce and a mix with pine, or pure pine, and maybe a little dressing of broadleaves, but very, very little of that. And like you planted up to the road, you couldn't keep back from the road as well, or you'd be deducted area, So of course that has all changed now, and rightly so, because you see, I suppose the problems we're having now are plantations that were planted 30 years ago, where they were planted right up to the road, and that was the requirement. Same with with the under the power lines, the electricity lines as well. You're only told to keep a certain amount out of it, and that's probably going to change as well.
Paul, just from a financial point of view, there was deep peat bogs planted back in those days, but surely that ground must have been a lot cheaper to buy and therefore more profitable in the short term.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah, the big areas. Now, I wasn't involved in a huge amount of those areas in the west of Ireland. I only short working over there. But yes, they were quite profitable for the company. Like, you'd double moorboard plough them. Planting was quite easy as long as the lads could stay standing on the area. And a ditcher drain across it, and you could do hundreds of acres, and there was hundreds of acres planted, with mostly spruce and pine mix. And they were quite profitable, yes, yeah. Yeah, I imagine, yeah.
Paul, was there problems getting those ones established? Did you ever hear, or were they just lashed with fertilizer? And
we're given 500 kgs of ground rock phosphate initially, and sometimes you'd have to come back maybe after year 4 for the second phase grant and apply more fertilizer and maybe some nitrogen.
Wow.
But if you got away with it, you didn't.
Farming back then was intensive, and people were farming to the ditches and farming to the roadside and farming to the rivers. But did anyone in the live situation of planting a new farm, did any of the neighbours query how close forestry was coming to them, or were people a little bit unaware of what was coming down the track?
Well, yes, that was when another issue was negotiating with that. Usually, a lot of the cases, if it was somebody planted themselves, they would only be planting the poorest of ground. But a farm usually would have come up for sale, so the forestry would have bought it, and we'd apply. Now, we didn't have to put up notices or anything, but we'd apply. The next thing we would rock up to start mounding maybe, and then there'd be a delegation at the gate and a lot of things, and very, very often people would want to swap ground and all that kind of thing. The better ground, and sometimes there would be quite hostile now, people there, and you'd have to try and negotiate with them and that kind of thing. And then they'd be planting beside houses, and we'd give setbacks and things like that, to them and work with them as best you could. When I started, the premium was quite pathetic, in hindsight, but land was like the best top price you'd pay for land at the time was about 500 an acre, and then, we bought a lot of land at, on average between 200 and 300 an acre. But the premium was only £47 an acre for the first 20 acres, I think. And then it went down to something like £15 an acre, And I remember, at the time the grants were poor, so the company used to have to charge money for the first 4 years. Sometimes they'd have to give over the first 4 years a premium to cover the actual cost of afforestation at the time. So, and then usually, you get the grant, and then you get the first 4 years, then mandate the first 4 years of premium. But then you could tell them, well, you'll be getting almost 50 euro an acre for the next 10 years or something like that, or 50. I think it was a 15-year or 20-year premium. I don't think it was a 20-year premium. I think it was 50. But then if they had any off-farm income, they weren't entitled to a premium at all, so.
Okay. So quite a few terms and conditions.
Yes, yeah. But it got us started, and it kept increasing, to where we are today,
Yeah, very good. So mostly Affor, probably not a lot of private clear felling going on back in the 90s then.
No, we didn't. You wouldn't have seen a processor or a forwarder. You'd only see them in Irish Forestry magazines or that kind of thing, or if you were up with where Coillte were working nearby. But no, there was no private clear filler thinning being done. There was no private forestry there. There was some maybe big estates that had it, but not in the part I was dealing with. But no, definitely not.
Okay, well, look, good to get the background there and a little bit of context for how you started out and what way that was. Let's move on then and talk about your own forest, Paul. Mm-hmm. Could you give me a quick overview of your own forest that you planted?
Yeah, well, one of the good things, I suppose, working with Greenbelt, they allowed us to, if something came along that you were able to maybe found a bit of value, and the first place I think I bought was 19 acres, actually, I think, yes, over near Kilkelly there, and I think it was £3,000 at the time. This was way back in 1990 or something. And I got to go ahead that I could buy it myself, and the way because I was the same as a client to them, so they just did the grant, and that kind of thing was mandated to the company, and you were just like another client as such, so you could work away. There was no. That's the way I did it anyway, So, so that was, so that was planted with spruce and pine, some pine in it, and small bit of larch. I think actually because there was some dry knolls and hills in it now. I suppose. Looking back, I suppose if it hadn't been planted today, if it hadn't been planted then, it wouldn't have been planted today now. Certainly I wouldn't have got the 19 acres in it, So I got that planted, and that worked out well. No, well, I had trouble with fires, and that actually it was damaged with fire, and on 2 occasions actually, So, but not all of it was burned, so I had to go through the reconstitution on it, and we got the reconstitution grant and some insurance payment as well,
And so, Paul, was it running down to a heather bog, or how did the fire get going?
I don't know. It started from the side of the road. That's all I can say. I got a call, but we were able to successfully extinguish most of it.
And tell me then, Paul, just to bring us to the present day with that particular forest, did you thin? Did you put a road in? And did you clear fell, or where is it now?
That one is that was low yield class, really yield class, and of course, as I said, part of it was. So yes, it was thin. Now, I know as it happened, another piece of ground came up beside it, so we put the road in from the other piece of ground, which I planted later. And again, like that, I picked up another couple of acres at the back of us, and picked up, so a bit kind of a piecemeal jigsaw, which is the way it kind of goes. So that was there. All of that ground now has been thinned twice, and some of it has unfortunately been windblown now. So we have a clear fellow. We had a clear fellow license, and we're at the process of clearing that now as well.
And Paul, will you clear it entirely, or are you going to leave some of the slower stuff for a later clear fell?
Well, as much as possible. Only what's damaged because of the prices at the moment. It's not viable to clear much more than. But now there'll be pockets like that are standing that. Yourself, they'll only blow down if you don't clear them at this stage. I could have cleared them a couple of years ago, but being the wise old fool I am, I was waiting for the price to come up a little bit and all that. So, what do they say? The plans of mice and men is that have some cliche like that. So
yeah, well, the crystal ball would be good to have, and it's hard to make those decisions. It's never simple. And Paul, so you described land that was a little bit prone to fire and that mightn't get planted now. I mean, when you do cut clear fell the weakest part of that ground, is it fit to carry a second crop, or what way will you handle it at that stage?
As it happens, yes, the areas that were planted were quite fertile. I'd be going back with the maximum amount of Sitka spruce I could,
And would you put in some pine in it, just if the soil's a wee bit weaker, or is it good enough to take a pure Sitka crop?
Yeah, well, the areas that I'm going to clear fell now are pure spruce, and they'll carry spruce again. But yes, I'll have to look at. There is an area that's it's over this 35 years of age now, and it's some of it's thin. And when that's cleared off it, yes, I'd have to consider that. But there was always the thought that you'd plant. First of all, you'd plant. Spruce and pine mix, and that's the second rotation. That was the thinking and the thought at the time, that it would be good, and it would ameliorate the soils, as I said, and improve it with the drainage, that you should be able to carry a pure spruce crop the second rotation. That remains to be seen, I suppose.
Again, thinking even further down the line, and maybe you're not thinking it this far, but you're replanting now. With the way the storms are going and the wind, have you any idea whether you'll continue to thin as a practice for that type of a plantation, or will you just leave well enough alone and just bring it to full maturity before clear fell?
Yeah, it's something you'd have to, and it probably won't be my decision. It'll whoever inherits it after us, I suppose, that will decide. But, the usual thing is, with these things, everybody will brace back and no thinning, and then it'll be wolf, nothing has happened for years, and then we'll all start thinning again, and somebody will come up with this great idea of thinning, and it'll be all flavour of the month again, and, maybe not. But certainly, I think, where the soil is, you've good drainage and the soil is quite good and fertile. They shouldn't really, like when storms came in down south in 2014 and damaged, plantations there, all it came in Limerick Bay there, and blew in through Limerick and up through Tipperary, Kilkenny, and on that way, and damaged a lot of plantations there. And so it may not come, so that's so many years ago. So you don't know, but I would still think you're going to do a certain amount of thinning, because you need, the income comes in, and it means that you're going to clear fell much sooner as well, and your percentage of sawlog in your crop will be much higher than if you don't thin, so.
Yeah, pros and cons, I suppose, yeah.
Pros and cons, yeah.
We'll get back to the conversation with Paul Lafferty in a second. But if you're in the market for forestry lands, go to forestsales.ie, where you'll find forests for sale across the country and all the information you need to make a decision. That's forestsales.ie. Now, back to the interview with Paul himself. Maybe you'd tell us an idea of the type of forests and the land you're selling on forestsales.ie.
Yeah, well, we sell big and small, I suppose. So, obviously the bigger ones, there's more in them, I suppose, to sell, and make bigger prices and bigger demand from them. But there's also the customers there that want to buy the smaller one, So if 50, 60 acres of plantation comes up, pure spruce or something, there's the big institutional investors are typically going to be involved in them. But the smaller person that has 20 or 30,000 to spend, the smaller can't get by anything on that scale, obviously, but they still like to have a piece of forestry. And there's, I call them kind of recreational forests and kind of hobby forests as well. So the small areas, they sell as well, and we have a number of them on the market. We don't turn away anything really, First, if it's for the website for forestry or that land or our forests, and smaller ones. And people are always looking for something with a bit, with maybe a ruin of a house on it, a stream, in a good area beside a lake and all that. And smaller ones like that will sell well. And I find people have, maybe 25, 30, up to 30,000 to spend on those. You won't spend 300,000 on a recreational project, but you might spend that kind of money. So, but obviously the bigger ones, the better. The 40, 50 acres of pure spruce, and that were planted back in the 90s. They're the ones that are in high demand and get good prices,
Yeah, well, you mentioned institutional investors there. So let's take the case that you have an institutional investor coming to you. What are they looking for when they come to buy a forest, apart from size and species? So what are the factors that they look at? Because probably we'll have forest owners listening who in the back of their mind might one day sell. And is there things they can put in place, or what can they do to be ready for that day should it ever arrive?
Yeah, I suppose what the institutional investors are looking for, is a big area, of productive conifers, generally speaking, and the access is huge, So and the location, so and the nearer to the sawmills and main artery routes and that, so you have no trouble with bridges and all that, but weight restraints on roads, and so if you have to haul, timber is a bulky, relatively low value. If you haul it too far, it's not worth hauling it. At some respects. So, but the forest owner, that they can't change that. They can't change the location, or maybe not the species, and they can work on access. So, definitely having a felon license and having a road license, if it hasn't been tinned. But the fact that it has been tinned, if there's a road in, it has been successfully tinned, it ticks an awful lot of boxes, because that means, well, okay, so it has been tinned, and so that means trucks can come in and leave successfully, and it's and then it usually after it has been tinned, so that means it can stand up and it hasn't been damaged, hopefully, by a storm like that. So having the felon license, having the road, ideally have the road in. And maybe for certain sections of it nearly always, some part of the forest it could be thinned, So if those things are done, as soon as I see a road in, if you look at the aerial photograph of it and you see a road in, well, that, well, at least the trucks were able to come to make the road, and the digger and all that. So that ticks the box straight away, Now, but the institutional investors, far away, along the West Coast, they're not that hot on them,
Yeah. What size of plantation are they looking for? Am I right in saying that maybe they're accepting smaller sizes than they would in the past, or how do you see that at the minute?
Generally speaking, I suppose the sort of a minimum sort of idea of 30 acres. But again, if it's adjoins something they have, they'll look at it, and they'll probably bid accordingly as well, But sometimes, some piece can be the vital piece of jigsaw for access. As I said, it can bring them out onto another road or connect up another plantation they have. So, like, I would always do a bit of detective work, see who your neighbours are, and if a plantation comes up, then a huge amount of plantations now adjoin other plantations. So it can be, and not everybody knows who a plantation is. Like, it's one of the things that can be hard to find out who even if might be belong to somebody who had it previously and maybe call that, but could change hands a couple of times without the general public knowing. So it's important to know who they have, who owns it, and they may be interested in buying another piece beside it. But isolated pieces on their own with bad access, they're the institutional investors aren't going to buy them, but the smaller operators, and might have an opportunity there to buy a place, put their toe in the water and buy a plantation. And, by the time it comes to clear to thinning it, maybe if it's a young plantation, the fields beside it could be planted up as well, and what I'd like kind of to see is more cooperation between owners, getting roads put in particular, and, working together with fellow licenses and that. There's a lot of work to be done there,
Are any of the institutional investors, or is there any specialist investment houses that are looking seriously at broadleaf plantations?
Well, I suppose, there was back, maybe, let's say, if we went back when I started, we'll say in 2011, institutional investors didn't want to know about broadleafs, didn't want to know about pine. And like it, if you had 40, 50 acres and there was, 10 acres the far side of the road that was planted in ash or maybe oak or something like that, they would say, well, we're not going to give you anything for that, we could hold on to that, But then there was a sea change in that when, environmental awareness came along, and they had to be seen to be green. So they, they want to be able to say that they had, and they generally wanted to have a little bit more diversification in their portfolios. So they were beginning to not put huge value on it, but at least they were making an offer on it and including it in it. And they were, and of course, when they bought bare land, then if they had to anyway, because of their rules, to plant a certain amount of broadleaf. So, and we had, up to last year, maybe up to 2 years ago, a lot of the big multinational companies, your Apples and Googles and these things, and McDonald's and that, were buying plantations and invested in it to seem to be green, But actually, unfortunately, when the new president of America came in, and they have kind of stopped that, this unfortunately, it has had a huge effect that way, because it's not seen to be important, which it becomes more and more important every day. But unfortunately, powers that be seem to have changed people's mind in the higher levels of these companies,
Very good. And okay, so let's look at the scenario, Paul, where I was bringing my 15-year-old mixed species plantation to you for sale. I'm still in premium. What's the information you want to put that live on the website, or what do you generally gather before it goes live?
Yes, well, the first thing, I suppose, obviously, we need to the species map, and if there's a premium left, the actual how much premium is it, how many years are left. They're key things. So I normally do evaluation for a person at the start to say that send me the information. Look, I'll do evaluation let you know what it is, what it would make in the current market, and then they can decide then whether they want to proceed to put it on the market then, and we have a small fee for that just to keep ourselves in business, I suppose. And then if they proceed to want to put it on the market, we auction, typical auctioneering fees on it, and a small bit of advertising to advertise it on the website. And generally that's enough to get our plantation sold, Now, as I always say to people, forestry isn't the quickest seller in the world, but the good thing about forestry on the market is that, in 99% of the time it's appreciating as it goes, So even if it's sitting on the market for 6 months, it's either come up to a growing season or has gone through another growing season, And sometimes I would do evaluation that people may think it's, not less, worth a lot more, and they might think it's worth, surprised that it was worth, I thought it was worth a lot less, but it actually was worth more. But in some cases, people have more ambitious prices, and sometimes it takes a while for it to grow into that price. And if the market rises, and we sell them, they get offers on them. We try and get as many offers as we can on it. And what we can do for people is get competitive bidding on a plantation, So the amount of people that are on the website and will, get interest and start bidding on it, And then at least it finds its own market, as I always say to people, we could all hope that it was worth X, Y, and Z, but you have to get somebody to actually commit to paying a price, and that's the real market valuation of it,
And so you've got my forest up for sale. It sells for 200,000. Have I commission to pay, or what happens there, Paul?
Yes, yeah. You have pay auctioneer's fees. Typically is 2% of the sale price plus VAT, Now, if it's a small plantation, we do have a minimum fees as well to cover ourselves. Obviously, if you sell something for 30,000 or something, 2%, so you won't buy a lot with that, So there we have minimum fees rated for around 2,000 to 2,500, depending on the plantation and that,
Paul, just on the marketing and the imagery, you go out on site, but do you use drone photography just to give an added bit of information there for a prospective buyer?
One of the things we have is the Google Maps, really. So we have an interactive Google Map of each plantation is plotted on a specific Google Map. So then we put all the plots in and all the details in on it and features. So if you click on the icons on it on the website, you'll see the what plots and what information we have on it. And we do use drone footage as well, and the land registry map and all that kind of information is there. Like we try and give as much information as we can for people who go out on the ground to get a good handle before they go, and then when they go out on the ground, and actually it depends on if you have a smartphone, you can actually log into the website, bring up the Google Map, and it'll show you the boundaries and the plot boundaries and all that. Of course, it depends on how good the coverage is on the forest, but the way it's gone now, I've quite a lot of places you can get good data coverage, So that can be a useful tool, especially if you have adjoining plantations and that. So, and you'll know where you stand, and you can take a plot in an area, and you can record the area, and can be useful when people are going out on the ground. As you were saying there, or somebody goes to me, that's what we do a lot of that, do a desktop valuation of it. So, and then maybe a site visit, but you want, when you have good aerial photography, and there's, between Google and the several other satellite imagery that we have access to, some more up to date than others, and we can assess. So you have to do less time sampling on the ground because you can see the uniformity of one area. Okay,
well, maybe we'd talk about a few specific examples that you're either selling, Paul, or forests that you've recently sold, just to give listeners an idea of what type of money a good productive forest is making. So we can't. There's obviously a huge range of forest quality out there in terms of soil or elevation. But let's assume that we're talking about a high yield class forest with good access. And maybe we'd look at a conifer, for example, Paul, for what you'd expect a good 20-year-old plantation to make, or something similar.
I suppose if you had it, as you described there now, if that was in the Leinster area and Munster area, you'd probably get a little bit more for it than in the Connacht-Ulster area. So, because the big population of the country is on that side. So you'd be hoping, I suppose this year, particularly year, prices are back a little bit, but you'd be hoping it'd make 6,500 per acre, maybe, if it was in Leinster, Munster area. I'm talking about the east of the country there. I would say, and in the west it might be slightly less, and of course this time last year was a good bit more, but prices will recover, I'd hope. But so that's where I'd be hopefully targeting that. And again, with competition, it can go in excess of that, and if there's an issue with it, it may make it a little bit less. Now, I suppose most people, if the foresters are sent out on behalf of the company or whoever's buying it, we work on the productive area as well, so they would value it on the basis of the productive area, and same as I do, I suppose, but so you take the areas of pure spruce, the areas that are Norway spruce, and the areas of biodiversity, conifers and that, but if those areas are 15% biodiversity, you wouldn't be put a lot of value on those in those areas, So generally, the net productive area is the area that is going to pay the day way at the end of the day. Especially if the premium is gone off it, we'll say, or waning, or if it's a company, they'll only get the premium for 15 years. So there could be, even though there's 5 years left on it, there might be no value in that for them. So the productive area is the area that really assigns the value.
So in that case, we've got 50 acres. Let's imagine we have 40 acres productive. That's the area that we're attributing the 6 to 7 grand an acre, Paul, is it?
Yes, yeah, definitely, yeah. You might be, the corner of the broadleaf. So suppose we could, 2,500. Now, the ironic situation is, I suppose, if there's ash in it, it's worth more value if there's a couple of hectares of ash in it, and it'll get the rust grant, and it can be replanted with spruce. So that's more valuable than the oak and Scots pine that's grown well. That's how we kind of approach the valuation of that one.
Let me pause the interview for a second to ask you this. Could your business benefit from increased profile in the forestry sector? Well, if so, maybe you should be advertising on Ireland's only dedicated forestry podcast, with new episodes coming out every 2 weeks. So get in touch with Forestry Now to see how we can make it work for you. Back to the chat with Paul. Okay, well, we'll move on then to a large broadleaf forest, just to give listeners an idea of what a block of broadleaf only will make. Is it working out at the 2.5 grand an acre, Paul, or have you seen broadleaf plantations with good access, let's say 30 to 50 acres? Are they making much more than that?
Well, they are in some cases, So again, if you're in particularly Leinster area and Munster area, we'll say, of Cork and Tipperary and sort of East Munster area, they're making relatively good, fairly good money, but on the region what you're talking about there, and plus, I would say, now again, more than likely there's some element of ash in it, so they're able to factor in that a little bit. But if you have quite a big area, it's only 10 hectares, so it's not a huge amount, but yeah, like a lot of people are looking at alternative uses as well, and sometimes the bigger plantations will be sold for alternative uses, and there are a few sort of environmental funds as well buying plantations and converting them to CFC, continuously forestry cover, and the like of that, So, and some conifer plantations are being converted, and they have the funds there to do that. So, and there's other private investors as well that are interested in good quality broadleaf plantations for the long term,
Yeah. So what are we saying then, Paul? 2 to 3 grand an acre, or a little bit?
It could be more like, and the bigger the area, sometimes the better options, alternative uses, and all that, and options are there for them. But yes, it could be 3, but 3.5 in some cases. It depends on people look at the quality of the ground underneath and make a judgment on that. But a lot of the people buying those kind of plantations aren't looking for an immediate return on it.
Very good. Okay, and then Paul, could we look at Refor ground, or land that has been clearfelled? Again, let's imagine that it has replanting license for Sitka again, and it's good access. Where are you seeing Refor ground at the minute?
Well, again, this is taking a bit of a hit. I suppose we go back again to last year. I suppose it was at around 2,000 an acre, and now it's back again to around 1,000 to 1,500, depending on how many acres are involved. Smaller pieces now will always get a little bit more. If there's the Refor ground of 5 acres, even as I would always say, you need to be getting 10,000 to sell anything, nowadays with costs and everything. So they may get a little bit more, but there's surprisingly little of it being offered to me, and at the moment now, and then again, it's not as easy to sell as I thought it would be, some of the smaller places there now, I suppose, and people wanted to sell them, but just not as fast as I thought it would be, because it's a great opportunity for somebody who has the wherewithal to do their own planting, and maybe if they're really good at machine work or that, you can, rather than paying the high prices for land which attract a premium, and get in there and get it, especially if you're, in your early 20s or 30s, in 30 years' time, you could have a nice nest egg there without a lot of investments, But, between 1,000 to 1,500, depending on what sort of crop comes off it, like, again, if you're a plantation that you're going straight away, you're going to be 20% broadleaf on it. So more than likely, even if it was 100% spruce or 100% conifer, you're back to so you're, again, as I said, the productive area is going to be a little bit less, but and your setbacks from roads, rivers, and any stream or that in it. So people are looking at the productive area. It's not just going in, like I said earlier, there where we planted every acre, every inch of ground. There could be significant unproductive areas in reforestation ground because of the terms of the felling license. So that naturally kicks back into it. But there at the moment, and I suppose maybe as with those climate, the new grants for reforestation, some people are looking at those as well, but they haven't had much effect on the actual demand or prices that we're getting for refor ground.
And lastly, Paul, just to keep it with real examples, is there much coming online with bare farmland that's still being farmed but has the full planting permission for FD12, the Sitka spruce category?
Again, less of that coming on the market, but there are some coming on the market and people are getting approval and all that. But that's if it has approval, and as you say, for FD12, and that is in good demand, and because getting the high premium and that. So and we had sold some of those at around the 8,000 an acre mark.
Paul, we never mentioned how the price of farmland and demand for farmland itself is affecting just that base market for new plantations. There was a day when in certain parts of Ireland, the price that an investor might pay for forestry ground was higher than a local farmer might pay. Has that changed? Or is it similar at the minute?
Well, similar at the moment, I suppose, in some respects. But two things have happened, I suppose, and they're going against in opposite directions. First of all, I suppose, land that's approved now, it's nearly the best of agricultural land, so it's been approved. Only on the areas that would normally be approved. And when the general public would say, well, that should be planted, that's not been approved or can only be planted with native woodlands without drainage and things like that. So that's on one hand. And then on the other hand, in this particular year, farmers, have got very good prices for their agricultural products, such as the cattle prices and, particularly the wheeling trade and all that, and beef prices are way up from where they were. So, farmers are going to pay more. They're certainly going to be less willing to put that land into forestry if they can make a decent return from farming, and less land has been approved, and less of it is coming on the market for that reason, So farmers, wouldn't be inclined to, after having a good year, wouldn't be inclined to say, well, no, I'll plant the best of land, and if they might plant the areas that they might consider planting, the areas and that they want to plant, but then when they'd actually go to get it approved, they find that, well, I was talking to somebody in the Afforestation, and they said they have to nearly turn away about 80% of their clients because they tell them, when they look at their maps and look at the where the land is, they say, well, you won't get approval, or it's not worth our while trying to get approval for you, for 10 acres of low-lying ground maybe. And even though it's productive and would grow some great crops on it, the department in their wisdom have decided that these areas shouldn't be planted, and I think myself that these schemes, this current scheme is counterproductive because, whereas if it went into forestry in some shape or form, it would be very good for the environment. And in my opinion, any tree is better than no tree. And but the farmers say, well, okay, I'll plant those 10 acres, but I'll have a go at reclaiming that land that you told me I couldn't plant. And they're going to drain it, they're going to plough it and reseed it and fertilise it and drive it as much as they can to get some production out of it. Whereas in forestry, it may be fertilised once and it's been locked in there for 30, 40 years without any further drainage. So in my opinion, it's a counterproductive. It's supposed to be good for the environment, but the totality of it, he needs to be looked at,
Yeah. So, Paul, just following on from what you're saying, we're talking here about screening for different environmental areas. And so before a forestry company would go out to look at a piece of farmland for potential Affor application, they maybe will screen out many of them as simply unsuitable on the basis of what the department are telling them. Surely that has a devaluation effect on that farmland, that it's no longer eligible. It will never be in the market at the forestry prices. So it only will serve a local farmer. Has that pushed some of that marginal land, the value of it, downwards, or held it at a level?
Yes, it probably would, I suppose. Yes, it definitely is. But I suppose that it's not really coming to apparent in the market, I suppose, because farmers are happy to buy it at those prices, because they're still getting a decent return, as I said, because just in this particular year, agricultural prices are up. So it's, but yes, if the two go down, like if land can't be approved, it's certainly low, gets low value, and if it can be farmed, well, it has a certain value, and if you get area entitlements and all those schemes, and if you can get it into acres and that, it's worth something, so it put a straight for a forestry value. Yes, it would pull the forestry investors and individuals out of the market and leave it to the local market then, But it certainly has a devaluing effect on it. If like all land prices are, it's what can be returned from them. So in respect, we have quite a supported agricultural price in Ireland because of all the area entitled forestry premiums, the acres, all these schemes. They support the price of land.
Yeah. Paul, just then to finish off, do you see any opportunities or trends that are coming down the line that forest owners or landowners should be aware of? Things that seem to be gaining in importance?
The whole biodiversity side of it seems to be big, and different, like as I mentioned there, continuous forestry cover and that, and agroforestry as well. We hear people on the radio talking about a great new machine that can fix carbon, and and it's going to do this and that and the other, you just plant a tree and it fixes as much carbon as practically all year round, the way we have growth all year round, The website there, and we have a section where we'll be talking about carbon credits on it. So basically, as far as I understand, somebody would have a plantation growing, and it's fixing carbon, and they may be able to get some payment for them. But it's an interesting topic that's probably going to increase in the future as well.
Brilliant. Okay, well, listen, Paul, thanks very much for joining me. It's great to talk to you.
Thanks, Dermot.
That's it for this podcast. Feel free to comment or subscribe for more episodes.